everybody. My name is Mike Orshan, and today we have with us Dr. Paul Maxwell, Executive Director of the Binational Sustainability Labs. And Paul, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Paul Maxwell, and I'm the Executive Director for the Binational Sustainability Laboratory. I've come to this position through a rather strange background. I've worked in the federal government for a number of years, both in the U.S. Congress as well as within the executive branch. In the congressional activities, I was a science advisor to the House Science Committee and worked on a number of issues related to technology transfer and economic development strategies using science and technology. I also spent a number of years overseas as a science counselor for the U.S. Department of State, including working in Argentina, India, and Mexico. And again, I was involved in economic development issues related to science and technology as part of my activities at that time. More recently, I was the Vice President of Research at the University of Texas in El Paso.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the Binational Sustainability Lab and maybe focus on a couple of areas. One is, what's its value proposition? What area does it encompass? What area does it have responsibility for? And can you explain Sandia National Lab's role in the Binational Sustainability Lab?
Well, if I could, let me just give a little short history. Sandia National Labs became interested when they started looking at issues of security and thinking along the lines that if you had political tension at border areas in the world at large, that often those tensions are created by economic disparities in those same regions. So if you could introduce economic strategies that would reduce the wealth disparities or economic disparities, then you could reduce the political tensions as well. And with that in mind, they began to look at the U.S.-Mexico border as a place where if we could introduce technology-based economic development, we could help reduce the political tensions in our own border with our southern border with Mexico. With that in mind, they proposed the creation of a single laboratory in the border region, a binational sustainability laboratory, focusing on technology to develop opportunities in areas within the border region was very much of interest to many of the policymakers and academicians and folks in the border region. And so with that, universities and the University of Texas El Paso in particular, together with Sandia and other organizations, decided to take a little closer look at how we might develop a strategy that would focus on technology-based economic development. Out of all of that, in short, came the concept of developing a laboratory facility within the U.S.-Mexico border, not just in one region, but to focus attention in the entire U.S.-Mexico border, and to try to bring value through creation of a partnering and linking organization that would interconnect between the U.S. border, between the U.S. and Mexico.
If you look at the United States has maybe 3,000 or 4,000 VC firms that are formal VC firms, and Mexico has a handful. And in order to really get incubate companies and get them going, capital will be required at some point. And now you're in the middle between the United States and Mexico. Could you give us a little bit of information on how will capital come to create companies or help companies get off the ground?
In Mexico, this is a challenge because, as you've said, there's only a handful of venture capitalists in Mexico, whereas in the United States there are several thousand of these types of groups or individuals or organizations. And so part of our challenge is to connect what we know of the technology and the new startup businesses in our region and make their efforts available to these venture capitalists on the U.S. side. In Mexico itself, we need to help Mexico nurture an entire culture of innovation so that hopefully in the future we can see more opportunities for financing of innovative companies. Currently, the way we're dealing with it, and another way you can deal with it, is through the governments themselves, either at the state level or the federal level. And here in the U.S.-Mexico border region, a number of the states are introducing strategies for trying to invest state funds into new technology-driven startups. Both sides of the border are trying to work this problem in similar ways. Not, for instance, in Texas, there's a thing called the Emerging Technology Fund, which presents an opportunity for new startups to get access to $100 million in funds that are basically seed funding or late-stage research funding, prototype development funding that I mentioned earlier. On the Mexican side, it's a little more complex, but each of the states on the border are looking at trying to create similar funds, but they're usually matching them with federal dollars, and so they talk about mixed funds on the Mexican side. Both sides are looking for similar tactics or ideas for promoting economic development.
Is any of this a reality today?
Well, if the question is, are there real companies being created as a result of these types of programs? And the answer is yes. We're currently involved with roughly a dozen new companies that have come into being in only the last year and a half. I've been fortunate to be involved with a couple of new startups that came out of research in our region here that now look to be very real companies with some very significant profits. Okay, Refinery Science is one company. This comes from research that was conducted at both the U.S. University of Texas at El Paso and Mexico's Center for Advanced Materials Research in Chihuahua. This company is at a state where they're ready to move to initial product offering of stock, which means that they're a real company. They're going to be able to offer stock offerings on the stock exchange, and they're going to go forward. We're talking about a value proposition of one company, sales representing $50 million in 1 or 2 years, with several hundred engineers and scientists employed by that company. Another example is a company called Team Technology. Now, Team Technology is a Mexican company. Its fabricating manufacturing unit is going to be established in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, which is right across the border from El Paso, Texas. And the CEO of this company is the former director of Delphi Research Technology Center in Juarez, Mexico. So this company is going to build these devices in Mexico. We are helping Lorenzo, the general manager, to headquarter in the United States, develop his business plan, and develop his strategies for a global economic development in the state of Texas.
Mexico has gone beyond being low-cost labor. They're actually moving up that ladder, and I think programs that are helping that along will be successful because the people are there, the brains are there, and the workforce is ready for that.
This is not a help program for Mexico, but it is a partnership that we're creating between the two countries, between the regions on both sides of the border, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Paul Maxwell at www.bnsl.org. Talk to you soon.